Holy Gospel according to Luke, the 2nd chapter. Glory to you, O Lord. Now every year, Jesus' parents went to Jerusalem for the festival of the Passover. And when he was 12 years old, they went up as usual for the festival. Behind in Jerusalem. But his parents were unaware of this. Assuming that he was in the group of travelers, they went a day's journey. Then they started to look for him among their relatives and among their friends. And when they did not find him, they returned to Jerusalem to search for him. After 3 days, they found him in the temple, sitting among the teachers, listening to them and asking them questions. And all who heard him were amazed at his understanding and his answers. When his parents saw him, they were astonished, and his mother said to him, "Child, why have you treated us like this? Your father and I have been anxiously looking for you." He said to them, "Why were you searching for me? Did you not know that I must be in my father's house?" But they did not understand what he had said to them. Then he went down with them and came to Nazareth and was obedient to them. And his mother treasured all these things in her heart. And Jesus increased in wisdom and in years, and in divine and human favor. This is the gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, O Christ.
You may be seated. So over this holiday break, my family and I made the last-minute decision, rather than sitting home for the kids were off for 2 straight weeks, rather than sitting at home for 2 straight weeks, that we wanted to go somewhere. So we made last-minute overnight reservations at Great Wolf Lodge. You have been to Great Wolf Lodge. I know some of you have. We saw a family from church there, right? In the wake pool. It's like, hey! But you haven't been there, it's awesome. It's a hotel and a little resort. We stayed one night, and it has an indoor water park with water slides and wave pools and pools. It's awesome. But also for parents, it's a little nerve-wracking. Because as your kids set off in the water park, you begin to watch like a hawk, right? I remember when we climbed up the many, many flights of stairs to go down the water slide, that my kids were so excited to go down, that they would go first, and I'd be at the top watching them just descend into the abyss of the water slide. And then my attention would turn to the monitor that showed them coming out the other end. And my eyes would be fixated on that just to make sure that they came out, like there was another escape that they could have gotten out of the water slide, right? But there I was watching them make sure they came out. One time, my youngest, he went down feet first and he came out head first. So I don't know what happened in the middle of that water slide. But they all came out safe. And then they loved the wave pool. So we were in the wave pool for a little bit, and then my wife and I found that there was a nice spot with a little table that opened up that we could sit at, and we could watch them in the wave pool. And we were doing that. Right? We were watching them, always, every minute or so, okay, got them all. Right? And as we were sitting there, another guest came up to a staff member that was clearing one of the tables and said words that no parent wants to hear. "We lost a child." And I remember that staff member not going into any panic, but it just seemed like he knew what to do. He knew exactly what to do. He said, "Okay, went on his radio, right?" And it's as if, and I guarantee you that they have a training for this. They have a protocol and a procedure when a child goes missing in the water park, right? This is a fear that no parent wants to have, and even the best parents it can happen to, right? And they follow that protocol. I don't know what happened. I assume there were no big announcements. There were no, I didn't see any more panic the rest of the day, and I assume they found the child. But I was amazed at how that staff member just quickly responded and went right into the training and the protocol that I'm pretty sure they went through. And I thought about that as I read the lesson for today. Mary and Joseph traveling back from a vacation trip, a holiday trip, Passover in Jerusalem, with family and friends, a huge crowd, leaving Jerusalem, and all of a sudden, a day later, they realize Jesus is not with them. The panic, the fear, where could he be? They assumed that he was with the group, right, with family and friends, that he was maybe hanging out with other kids his age as they made the journey back. He was missing for 3 whole days. I can't imagine that feeling of Mary and Joseph, because we live in a much different day and age. When my children leave school and they're walking home on their own, my older kids, I can, if I wanted to, track them on my phone to know their exact location. My Ring doorbell will tell me when they arrive back at home. And when they enter the code, I will get a notification to say that they are home and they've opened the door. Mary and Joseph had none of that. None of that. For 3 days, they wondered where Jesus was. And they found him. They found him not in an arcade playing a claw machine to get a stuffed animal, which seems like a place that you would find a 12-year-old boy. I don't know what the Jerusalem equivalent would be. But they find him back in the temple, sitting at the feet of the teachers, listening and questioning, learning. Probably not the first place you think to look to find a 12-year-old boy. For 3 days, Mary and Joseph were probably in a panic. But for Jesus, he didn't seem worried at all. This was exactly where he was supposed to be, learning and growing and connecting to God. I think this moment shows us something remarkable about Jesus. We know that we're going to see Jesus as a teacher as we begin to read the Gospel of Luke during worship. We see him as one who is full of wisdom and answers, but here, as he's learning and growing, we see him asking questions. Even as a child, Jesus was curious and engaged. He asked questions because questions lead us closer to God. I think sometimes in the church and in faith, we're taught or we assume that we can't ask questions about faith because we worry that it shows weakness or doubt. But Jesus shows us in the temple that questions are a part of a vibrant, growing faith. That even the Son of God had them. Questions invite us to explore, to learn, and to deepen our relationship with God. So as a congregation, between Christmas and Easter, we are going to be following the stories of Jesus and his ministry. Week after week, we're going to hear these stories. We started with his birth and his ministry, his teachings, and then ultimately his sacrifice for us. But I want us to remember today's story as we hear those. And I want us to remember how Jesus models what it looks like for us to sit at the feet, to learn, to soak it in, to ask questions, to grow our faith. Jesus listened carefully. He asked questions. He engaged in conversation. He showed up. What if we did the same? What if we approached our faith and our scripture and our relationship with God with open hearts that are ready to listen, ready to ask, and ready to learn? Mary and Joseph thought Jesus was lost, but Jesus knew exactly where he was to be. And yes, maybe he should have told them, hey, I'm going to be here for a few more days. But maybe you can relate to that feeling. Maybe that's why we have this story. That feeling of we have all these questions but no place to ask them, and we feel lost in our own faith journey. Maybe, like Jesus, we're looking to be closer to God. Maybe, like Mary and Joseph, we're searching to know Jesus or find Jesus, to deepen our faith. And I think back to that staff worker at the water park. The moment he was told there was a missing child, he knew what to do. There was a plan already in place, a procedure, a protocol that had been practiced and studied and learned. What if we, like Mary and Joseph, are searching for something in our lives, for what feels lost, and we are metaphorically, faithfully searching for Jesus? Maybe like that water park worker, we too need to know the plan. What are we going to do? What's the first step? Or else we might just find ourselves walking in circles. How can we grow closer to Jesus and deepen our faith? Let me share a few ideas. I think the first thing to making the plan is to prioritize our time to include God. Jesus made time to be at the temple. He chose to be there even as a young boy. It was a conscious choice. So how can we carve out time, even a little bit of time in our days, to make room for God in our daily life? Through prayer, maybe through quiet reflection, through reading a devotional. Maybe it's just a short moment of time before we share a meal with our family to offer up prayer, to read the Bible together before bedtime. Maybe it's time to figure out a plan to say, how can I be present in worship more regularly? What would that look like? What would it look like if you're like, oh, my kids have so many sports on Sundays, I don't know how I can carve it in. What if you say, hey, like my son today, you know what, you have a game, come in your uniform, be ready to go, but let's come to church and then go and play. How do we make time for God rather than say, we don't have enough time? Make excuses. Make a plan, or else it won't happen. I think the second thing we can do is tell ourselves it's okay to ask questions. Just like Jesus, we can ask questions when we're reading and studying the Bible, or reflecting on our faith. We can ask questions of God. A wonderful, faithful question we hear about in the Psalms all the time is to turn to God in prayer and say, why, God? Why? When things get difficult and hard to understand. You can put those questions in the box, and I'm going to figure out something to do with them, whether that's doing my best to answer them on maybe on social media posts or newsletters, or finding a way to work them into sermons or children's sermons. Let's explore faith together. But honestly, sometimes it's not about finding the right answers to the questions, but more about sharing them. Another thing we can do is make time to read Scripture. Because that's where we learn about who Jesus was and is. Each week in the bulletin, we print in the back, devotional. I want you to use that, to use parts of it at home and throughout your week. There's daily scripture readings that you can read, and mealtime prayers, and scripture verses that you can meditate on, and devotionals that can guide you and a friend or your family through this new year. You can also engage with community. Because I think faith grows best in community. There are many things we can do on our own. We can read, and we can pray, and we can do devotions on our own. But when we ask questions, something about growth happens in community. Join a Bible study, participate in worship, engage with others when you're here in this place, to share your journey with others. And if you want to get a group together and start a Bible study, come talk to me. I can give you resources and walk with you on that journey. And then as you're doing these things, keep an open heart and open eyes to see where God is in your daily life. To look for God each and every day. To live out the faith that you are exploring. Through acts of kindness. To see God in the beauty of creation and the people you encounter. To live out in practice that God is present in our world. And to see the Jesus that we learn from alive and in us. So Mary and Joseph found Jesus in the temple. He wasn't much lost. He was where he wanted to be, growing in his connection to God. And this year, let's follow his example. Let's sit at the feet of God with open hearts and grow in our faith through our questions and our learning. Because faith isn't about having all the answers. It's about seeking and trusting that God is with us every step of the way and learning as we go.